Hello, Tanya here to introduce you to our new pattern, the open back halter top pattern. So this is a very classic dance style costume top or sports top. So the possibilities are unlimited with this pattern. So let me walk you through the features. So as part of one of our new rollouts to all new tools, we have our custom measurement profiles that will pre-populate the form with all of your custom measurements. If you want to use our standard ASTM size tables, we have now built those into the tools directly, so you don't have to reference the size table and manually fill out the forms, which is great and a time saver. So we're just gonna go with the Missy Curvy size 2 for this demo, and I'm going to draft in inches, and we can see that the entire form has pre-populated with my measurements. So let's walk through the pattern options, which is very exciting. So we have the additional neck ease, distance below bust radius, strap width, open back depth, armhole side seam length, so we're going to put that at 50%, and then we have our main seam allowance, which is going to be for the shoulder seams, the side seams. I believe that's it. And then we have our, let's say we want to put that at 1, and then we have our arm and neck hole seam allowance and waistband. So if you wanted to use binding, for example, you would set that to 0. Then I'll put 12% negative ease and then submit my measurements. And then, oh, I was mistaken. I set the main seam allowance also goes on the waistband. So this is the pattern. Let me walk you through really quickly how we can change up some of these pattern options. So additional neck ease, in one of the other videos that I created, I really walk through what that is in depth in Illustrator, but I'll show you a quick demo here. So the default is around 2 inches or 4 centimeters. Let's say we wanted to set, as we see here, so this is the default. If we wanted to do, let's say, a boat neckline, I'm going to set that to, let's say, 6, and then I'm going to set my strap width to, let's say, 2, and then we'll see how this changes the neckline if you really want to pull your shoulder out to the side but have that boat neckline. So a very classic, also very dancey look. And then let's say we wanted to do something like a mock neck and really have that halter top look, and potentially using an enclosure for center back. So I would set additional neck ease to 0 and strap width to 0. And I'm going to just submit my measurements. I'm going to let that wait. And so I also put no seam allowance, so that'll make it very interesting for construction. But let's add some seam allowance onto that so it doesn't look crazy town. You might do maybe like half an inch or something to give yourself more to grab on when you're sewing, but we get the point here. So essentially we would attach our mock neck, and then however we're finishing, so let's say we do fold over elastic here for the armhole, and then we do our mock neck around the neck. That would be that look, which is very dancey. Let's talk about the distance below the bust radius. So that essentially can turn the top from a, let's say, sports bra type top, bralette. We can turn that into a tank. So my waist to bust was 16, but even if I go above the waist to bust, it will max out at the waist. So let's say I put 18, it's going to max out at what I put in terms of my waist to bust. And we see that now we have a tank. Let's say we wanted to close up the back a bit and not have it so open back. So given that you're really going to need to kind of experiment with your measurements and know what you're working with here, even when taking, let's say, custom measurements. So let's say our nape to waist is 16 and our waist to bust is 6.63. So let's say I want the open back to start at the bust. So I would just do 16.13 minus 6.63. I'm going to do an approximation. Let's do 10. The open back will then start more at the bust line. If you wanted to close it up a little bit more, let me move me. Okay, my math was a little bit off because we're also taking into account the neck and the neckline and everything, but you see that it's closed up a little bit more. Let's keep that at where it is, or actually let's drop that down a bit more. Let's put it to 9, and then let's do additional neck ease to fit over the head. Let's cut that down to maybe really conservative 0.25, and then we'll put the strap width at, and you can max it out. If you do go longer than your shoulder length, it will max out at the shoulder length. So I'm gonna put something crazy like 15. So we see, I'm gonna actually zoom out here, and I'm gonna move myself out of the way. So we see what we did here is we have that full shoulder length look, so it's a little bit more closed up. We have the open back starting a little bit lower on our pattern, and yeah, so this would be like a very solidly constructed top. You could then pattern hack it even more on color block or put in some mesh panels, but this is a great starting point for any dance costume. You could throw in a mock neck. So for example, we have our measurement legend down here to give you some guidance. I didn't see a point in adding this into pattern, but let me know your feedback if you want to add it into the pattern, because they're just rectangles. So I have a total waistband length with the mean seam allowance added at 22.5 inches. So whatever your mean seam allowance would be, you would know that you would have to cut a rectangle at 22.5, and that would essentially fit around the waistline. You can maybe cut, because it's open back, let's say you wanted a little bit more support at the waistline, you could maybe snip off an inch or two, but that is essentially what would fit. And then if you wanted to do, let's say, a mock neck, I think we set for this, we set our coal ease at almost like 0. If you wanted to do a mock neck, you would essentially take your total neck length with seam allowance, and then you would, however thick you want your mock neck, you would essentially create a rectangle with those dimensions. So you would do 12.54, and let's say I want my mock neck to be 2.5 inches, so I would cut a piece, let's say 5 inches in width plus my seam allowance at 1/4 inch, so 5.5 inches, and then in length I would do 12.54 if you wanted to fold it over, depending on your construction technique. And then adding, I guess it would be 0.25 for your enclosure. If you wanted to do an enclosure on the neck, that would be a pretty tight fit. You'd probably want to open back that a bit more, but essentially options are there depending on how you're constructing. If you want to do zippers, if you want to keep it open. So lots to work with. This pattern has a lot of options, which is great. And as always, you can use totally custom measurements, or you can draft from the ASTM size table. But because there's so many options, you can really customize this pattern even if you're using a size table and ready to wear measurements. I said this in previous videos. When we're getting more comfortable with vertical measurements, that is typically the place that we kind of get a bit tripped up. Vertical measurements need to stack. So if we're doing our nape to waist turn amount, and then our arm size is overlapping on our waist to bust, it'll cause some errors. So while we're getting more comfortable with taking custom measurements, we can definitely use the ASTM size table to really, help us, and then make adjustments to the horizontal measurements like the waist and the bust and whatnot. So that is one of the new patterns. We also have a closed back version, which is going to be very similar. Very excited to bring this to the drafting library. As always, if you use the pattern, please share what you make. You can share it in private, you can share it in public with a review. If you believe that our tools are worth 5 stars, that would be really helpful. And also, I just love to see what you guys sew. So thanks.